With question number 17, there is an algebraic way to solve this. However, it's something that we haven't and will not be learning in algebra. So our plan, I guess it should really be plan A, not plan B, is to graph them. And what it's asking us for is where the two graphs cross. So where do they cross? Where does f of x equal g of x? So we want to find their intersection points, and I think the faster way to do this, since there's two of them, is look at geometry, go into the geometry option instead of the analyze graph, which you could also do in that same menu, points and lines, and then intersection points. Then you just have to click on the two functions, and it shows the two intersection points of negative, and it looks like my calculator is rounding, but the actual intersection points are as follows. So negative 1.75, and I have negative 1.4375, but negative 1.44 and 40. Now the catch here is, what are they really asking us for? And they say the values of x. So we just want the two x values, which is the first value in the coordinate. Answer choice 2. So 18, there was a lot of reading in this one and a lot of interpretation. I think the easiest way to answer this question was to create tables of values. You could have also created equations, two different equations for A and B, but I think that the tables were a much more efficient, and it was a lot easier to see, much more efficient option. So company A started at 10,000, then kept increasing by 5,000, and then I only did it from 1 to 9 months because I looked at my answer choices. And I did the same thing where B started at 500 and then doubled. So we were just multiplying by 2. Hopefully you recognize that A was linear and B was exponential. So it says, for what monthly payment will company B's payments first exceed, so be higher than company A? And if you compare 7 months, you had 40,000 to 32,000, so the next month where it would be higher than was 8, month 8. Now, most of you probably did not show your work in a table. If you did, I'd be really surprised, and we are on the same wavelength. But I thought that showing a table was a nice organized way to compare the two values. And if you looked at all your answer choices, all they cared about were the mean and standard deviations of each of the two sets of data. So you're going to type in your data. I just labeled it A and B, and what you had to do was run the one variable statistics, which I like to do on a calculate page. As you can see here, this was my team A data, and I recorded it in my little chart, and team B's data. So when I compared my values, I could see that answer choice 1 was the only one that made sense. So the key words in question number 20 is if Lila completes the square. So right away you should be thinking, I need to complete the square. And that's exactly what I did over here on the right hand side. So I first stretched out the 7, and then I found the number that added to negative 12, but then I multiplied it to get the positive 36. So negative 6 plus negative 6 is negative 12, so then negative 6 times negative 6 is a positive 36. If I add 36, I have to take it away. So these pieces here become this final part. And then these pieces, let me use green, so the negative 36 plus 7 become the last value. And remember, this creates the coordinate of the vertex, so you also might see vertex form, and then you should think completing the square. For us, this was great because it just told us complete the square. The last thing that you want to do is match up your A with your A. Since it was both subtraction, all we care about, and I guess I should probably get rid of this piece here, is we just want the number that this is. Had that been a plus sign, then we would have had to have chosen answer choice 2, but because our A already has the negative in front, we can just match up 6 with the 6. Using a calculator on this one isn't the greatest, but what you could possibly do if you wanted to was graph the original equation and the new to make sure that you completed the square correctly. Okay, so here are the two graphs of the original and the new. You can see that the two parabolas lie right on top of each other. And I had to change my window around just because, well, you can see that the minimum is negative 29. So I went all the way down to negative 35, and then when I did that, I didn't see both of my zeros, so I just made my x values a little bit larger. You can see that they're the same. They don't give us the correct answer to this problem, but they do tell us that we completed the square correctly. 21, there was a lot going on in question 21. So we have two functions. Both of them are quadratic. So hopefully you read in the question up at the top, I should even highlight it here, that they're both quadratics. They're both parabolas. And as you can see, the first one is an upside down parabola because of this negative. And if you look at the range of values, you can see that there's a maximum here. Here's our vertex. Our maximum is at 1, 9. And I know this is a maximum, that it's upside down parabola, because all of the values are smaller than 9 for the y's. All right, so what I did here was I skipped over number 1. I could have found the average rate of change. I would have had to have made a table between the 2 points. I skipped it to save myself some time, because I thought that 2, 3, and 4 were a little bit easier to find. And then if I needed to, I'd go back to 1, which I didn't have to do. So in number 2, the y-intercept of g of x is 6, which is this guy right here. Oops, let's use blue, because it's our constant. Why is it not letting me change my color? Here we go. And the y-intercept of n of x is 8. So 6 is not bigger than 8. Number 2 is out. Number 3 says the function g of x has a greater maximum. So the maximum, well, what you wanted to do here was actually graph it. So we had to graph the function, which I did here, and I calculated the maximum, the vertex, and saw that the highest that it is 6.25, which is definitely not higher than our maximum here, which we have highlighted in green, which was 9. So that's not true. And then 4, this is a little weird, the sum of the roots. So the roots, remember, are the zeros. I found my zeros already in my graph for g of x. And in my table, I circled them, but I'll just highlight them as well, -2 and 4. So sum means that we need to add them. So -2 plus 4 is 2. And -3 plus 2 is -1, so 2 is bigger than -1, so number 4 was the correct answer. I think the easiest way to use or to complete question number 22 was to just find out the values when you found the sums. So what they were doing is they were telling you to add P and W together. The hardest part about this is making sure that you type it in your calculator correctly. With any of these questions that I went through the calculator option, watching me do it is way different than you doing it on your own. So if you're watching me do it and being like, yeah, that looks great, Mrs. Ruscio, you know, that is not going to help you. You have to go through and do it yourself in order to get the practice. Otherwise, I'm just going to pass the test and you're not. You know what I mean? Or I'm going to do better than you are because you're not practicing it. So if you look at how I've typed everything in, you can see that I have everything correct. The only answer that came out as a fraction was 2. And remember, what is a rational number? A rational number, I wrote out by definition, is any number that can be written as a fraction. So obviously answer choice 2 is correct. You could also be looking for repeating decimals, because repeating decimals can always be written as fractions, or decimals that end. Because if you say it right, 5/10, 0.5, you can write it as a fraction, 5/10. So if you say it right, you know what to write. Heading to question number 23, I really liked this because it was almost solved for us. The only thing that we needed to do was take the square root of both sides and then move the 3 over to the other side. Remember, when you take the square root of a number in an equation, you want to find the positive and negative root. That's why we have the positive and negative root sign in front. And remember, all of those answer choices are actually 2 answers in 1. So answer choice 1 is really 3 plus the square root of 7 and 3 minus the square root of 7. We just write it in a shorter way. Now, when I took the square root over here, we can see that x plus 3 is all alone now because the 2 and the square root sign canceled one another out. So x will equal, because I'm going to move the 3 over to the other side using inverse operations, will be negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 7. Answer choice 3. Looking at question number 24, this was a simplifying polynomial question. There was a lot to this, so we had to follow, yes, order of operations. So PEMDAS or GEMS. So whatever you use to help you, the first thing that you should have noticed is that exponents were what we needed to do first, which is what, oh, it's cut off a little bit, so let me scroll over here. That's what I did over here. So we needed to square x minus 2. So x minus 2 all times x minus 2, and we ended up getting x squared minus 4x plus 4. Notice how I didn't multiply yet my 3 because that comes after exponents. So my next step, I multiplied both the 3, or I distributed the 3 and the negative 2 to each of the following the parentheses that follow, and my last and final step was to group together my like terms. So I grouped together my x squared with other x squareds, which there weren't any. My x's got grouped together, and my constants to pick answer choice 4. Now, those of you who want a plan B, here it is. This is a great way to check on your calculator, or for those of you that completely had a brain meltdown in 24, this is another way that you could pick the right answer. So I first graphed the trinomial, and since they use the word equivalent, equivalent means that it has to be, yes, the same. So if we graph our original and we graph the correct answer, we should get the same picture. And look at that. When I graphed it, you can see that it covered up my pink fraction with my green one because they are exactly the same.